Welcome to Unit Design 101, where we break down the overall factors that make units useful in Fire Emblem and beyond. Whether you're a ROM hack creator or merely interested in overall design, this resource is for you. This week, we are examining dancers and refreshing units of all stripes, the absurd power of unit refreshing, and whether a dancer needs any more utility than that. Dancers are usually extremely fragile units with little to no capability of defending themselves. High luck and decent speed and resistance will only go so far on a unit with very poor HP and defense. It is often best if a dancer never sees any combat, and there is usually very little benefit in them doing so. Dancer is a colloquial term for any unit that can use their turn to give another action to an ally. Bards, singers, herons, and the new staff and spell are all included in this definition. One playable dancer has been in every main series Fire Emblem game except for Shadow Dragon, Gaiden, and Mystery of the Emblem Book 1. Some games, including Binding Blade and Radiant Dawn, have multiple units capable of refreshing, but never let you deploy more than one at a time. This is an important restriction, as if you had multiple units capable of refreshing actions as their basic repeatable action, it would easily become possible to have infinite actions, moving across an entire map in a single, never-ending turn. Some games, like Three Houses and Engage, introduce multiple options for refreshing units, but all options outside of a dedicated dancer unit have been limited, either by chapter, emblem charge, or other means. This prevents the situation of an endless dance chain, whilst also allowing the fun of refreshing a unit multiple times in a single turn. Which gets us to why dancers exist. It's fun to use a unit multiple times in one turn. Sometimes one unit is just better than your others for a particular situation, and you just want more of their attacks in ways that a different combat unit just couldn't replicate. Maybe you want to move one unit farther than normally possible on a turn, or attack and retreat in a game without canter. Dancers enable this sort of play as well. In some games, dancers are capable of refreshing multiple units with a single action. This force multiplier requires careful planning and positioning to make the most of, but if a single target refresh is seen as powerful, a quad refresh is often seen as game warping. That said, something like a four-way dance can trigger a player's gut reaction against wastefulness in an unintended way, where they may obsess about refreshing 4 units every time, even if it provides no more benefit, and possibly a positioning detriment, over dancing for only 1 or 2 targets. Going more specific, deploying a dancer with 5 move can allow a paladin or flyer to move up to 6 spaces farther on their first turn than they otherwise could, perfect for time-sensitive objectives such as in Battle Before Dawn. Deploying a dancer, archer, mage, and cleric allows you to have effectively 2 of all 3 types of non-dancer units when needed. 2 archer attacks against a flyer, 2 mage attacks versus armors, 2 staff uses when multiple units need healing, in ways that a single other unit cannot provide. And sure, the best unit in your army might contribute more than any one dancer, but the dancer often is not competing with the best unit for deployment slots. They are competing with the 12th best, or whatever the deployment limit is, and their base level contribution is a double action buff to your best unit on many turns. Of course, this all assumes your dancer is on the front lines, reaching your best units regularly, whilst somehow staying out of harm's way themselves. Sometimes this is easy. A solid defensive line can be formed, and then moved forward with your dancer just a few steps behind. Other times, this is harder, with ballistas or siege tomes making entire segments of the battlefield unsafe for such a fragile unit. Or, with units so far apart that your dancer can often struggle to reach any useful dance targets after the first few turns. Dancers are thus seen as skill check units for the player, a multiplier of the player's power that requires tactical planning and forethought to use effectively. A bulky wyvern or a general is fairly foolproof. You move them where you want them, and they do their job. It often doesn't matter if they see unexpected combat, because they'll probably survive, unless effective damage is involved. A dancer, on the other hand, needs protection. They need a target to have already moved next to their destination, they need the player to plan ahead in their following turn to make sure the dancer will have a new target that turn, and they need a safe zone to be created so they don't ever see combat. It is a difficult ask for a player to manage, which is why some players see dancers as useless, not fitting into their strategies. Some dancers do have combat abilities, albeit usually quite weak when compared to any other combat unit of roughly equivalent level. As the vast majority of dancers do not benefit much from levels, you don't get to dance better at higher levels and your combat is still not your main focus, the ability to equip weapons and fight should be seen as a last resort, maybe an augmentation of the weapon triangle in the rare instances that they see combat, or a small touch of chip damage to perform if they somehow have no viable dance target. The dancers of the GBA games and the herons of Tellius have effectively no direct combat capabilities. This focuses them down to solely being refresher units. With the temptation to attack with them removed, they instead become something of a platonic ideal of a dancer, a unit with a single purpose, one single action, yet nearly infinite possibilities through other units. But is there more that a dancer can do? And if so, can it compete with refreshing? Fire Emblem 7 The Blazing Blade introduced rings to give temporary status buffs to units. These increases were significant and powerful, but because of their limited uses and relatively niche applications, Ninian and Nils often saw use primarily as refreshers. Radiant Dawn attempted to give leveling herons a purpose by having them learn new utility songs, doing things like changing biorhythm or filling Lagoo's gauge. However, since the impact of these things is so much smaller than taking additional actions, once again, refreshing was the default action used, and many players might not even have known that these other songs existed. Shadows of Valencia attempted the reverse of Radiant Dawn, locking the Anu spell deep in Faye's cleric spell list. This served as a very effective draw for players who knew it existed to level Faye as a cleric throughout the game, but because it was locked deep behind a single class line option on one unit, with nothing in-game making the player aware of its existence, it ended up being, for many players, a fun optimization or goal on a second playthrough instead of a guaranteed reward for training a utility unit. There is still interesting possibility space for a utility unit to unlock unit refreshing at a later level, reminiscent of staff units gaining warp ranks late into the game, but it's unclear as of right now how that would work, and is a topic better explored on its own. But what have we learned about dancers? A dancer is often only as good as the player's ability to position them. If it's hard to keep them out of harm's way whilst also refreshing units, then their usefulness will be limited to players capable of doing so. Dancers are difficult to design around. Despite being very powerful, the skill required and variability inherent in their usefulness means you can't know with any reliability how players will best use refresher units, if they even use them at all. Dancers really should not see combat. While token combat ability is appreciated by many players, don't hesitate to remove it entirely if it suits the unit better, as this will barely impact the unit's usability in the vast majority of situations. Refreshing multiple units is incredibly powerful. This is an ability that should be carefully considered and planned around, whether that means giving it a use limit or restricting the dancer in other ways, such as having lower mobility. But that's all the time we have today. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe, as well as comment your thoughts on dancers and any other questions you would like me to answer in a future video. Join the Discord in the description for more opportunities to chat or hear about what games I've been playing. A huge thank you to the Lagoo's Guard channel members who monetarily support Unit Design 101, including Royal Lagoo's Guard, The Forgotten L, and Lagoo's Guards C2 Peekily, Enigmatic Mr. L, Mad Moke, Ro Duderman, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, Lakag, Relaz6, and Sal Millen. Thank you all so much, and until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.